This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. You are on Ask Rabbi.
Hi there. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, and this is Ask a Rabbi, and I'm only half dressed. I don't have my headset on. I knew something was wrong and different. Amazing how we get used to these habits. Thank you. And I'm still hearing music in it.
Yep. Music is still on.
There we go. Okay. Well, welcome to the first May Day Ask a Rabbi of 2020, the only May Day Ask a Rabbi. As we enter May, and to our Muslim listeners, Ramadan Mubarak. May you have a blessed Ramadan with all of the craziness of not being able to gather in the mosques and have gatherings in the evening and other times during the month of observance, and all of the travel that isn't happening in the world connected to it, because it is their biggest travel period.
Question.
Sure.
Explain Ramadan.
Ramadan is a month in the Muslim calendar. It is a daylight fast. And my Muslim friends are welcome to call in and correct if I say anything wrong.
Does that count water?
That includes water. That includes your saliva.
Wait a minute.
You don't swallow anything.
Really?
Yeah. As long as the sun is up, no food, no water. When the sun goes down, don't stand between a Muslim and his food or her food.
Okay.
Because they are hungry.
Wow.
But the fast is typically broken with just a date or two and a little bit of water. And then they'll typically eat. They'll eat during the night hours, because you obviously can't do a total complete fast for 30 days or you won't be with us. But it's what's called a daylight fast. If the sun's up, they're not eating. If the sun's down, they can eat. And obviously those who are diabetics and those who have health issues, pregnant women, don't fast.
I remembered some of the NBA players that I knew who happened to be Muslim that really had a difficult time, because this would be like the beginnings of their playoffs, and they would have a real difficult time getting through there.
Well, and one of the things with the with Ramadan, one of the differences in the Muslim calendar is that it doesn't have leap years. It's a lunar calendar, but it only has 12 months. It never has a leap year. It's because Muhammad and his followers were mostly trade-based, and so they didn't need to be tied as strictly and as rigorously to the crops and the solar.
Okay.
Right, because we operate on... See this perfect.
They were the trade folks.
They ran the caravans, and Mecca was a trade center. It was also the place where people came to worship idols, but it also was a trade center, and that's one of the reasons why it had the idols, because it was on the trade route. It was one of the places where if you were going to come across the bridge out of Asia and connect into Turkey and Europe, or down into Egypt and Africa, you kind of, it's one of the places you could go. It was connected. It was, if you look at a world map, there's not a whole lot of distance between parts of India and that area as you come up and then come across into the into the Arabian Peninsula, not the Iberians. That's in a different place.
Spain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be where that is. So sometimes my tongue gets wrapped around my eye teeth and I can't see a word I'm saying. Ah, yes, so bad. Anyway, so the Muslim calendar, every 33 years, it comes around and syncs back with a solar calendar. But it takes 33 years.
Okay, all right.
To work its way back in sync. The Jewish calendar and the Chinese calendar, both of which are lunar, and the Hindu calendar, also lunar, is intercalated into the solar calendar. What does that mean? That they paid attention to the solar year because it governs crops. The sun tells the seedlings when to come up. It doesn't care what the moon's doing, right? But ancient folks, in order to tell time, the thing that was easiest to tell time by was the moon, right? Because you could see it. It was in the sky every night. So you knew, at least once a day you got to set your clock, right? And so ancients used the moon because it was very obvious and everybody saw it, and it was the same all over the planet. So no matter where you were, you knew when the moon was. Now, that having been said, the Jewish calendar is tied by when the new moon is visible in Jerusalem, because the cultus was set in Jerusalem. And so word went out from Jerusalem to the diaspora to say what month it was. And that was a whole big ritual. There was a whole big, that was one of the functions of the Sanhedrin, was to declare the calendar and to declare when it was a leap year.
Now, do they still do something like that there?
We all have it's hebcal.com.
Hebcal.
Yeah, hebcal.com.
Oh, you're not kidding.
I'm not kidding,
I was going to say that.
No, actually, on my calendar, and you can subscribe to it, I get the holidays downloaded right onto my calendar. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So, there's all these different calendars that are intermixed. And so the Muslim calendar goes through 12 months a year, but it's never longer. And so it's not 365 days. It's 350-some days. Okay. Because it's 29 and a half days to a lunar cycle because, God made time so perfectly.
Now, the Hindus, do they have something
They have
comparable?
something, yeah. They use a lunar calendar, and they, every once in a while, when they see the season slipping, and they've got their signs that they look for, they do a leap year, the Chinese as well. And that's why Chinese New Year goes from January to February to January to February, January, February. Depends on whether or not it's a leap year. So it'll slide, and then it'll jump back, and then it'll slide, and it'll jump back. Same thing true with the Jewish calendar. So Hanukkah will appear to get earlier, and then it'll get late, and then it'll get earlier. It'll slide back and forth.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Right. So that's why you get anywhere from sometime in November to sometime in December is when Hanukkah will start. But it always starts on the 25th of Kislev. What's changing is when Kislev meshes with the Gregorian calendar. Right. So that's a big thing. Different cultures have different calendars. The Christian calendar, the Julian calendar, before the current, right now we're using something called the Gregorian calendar. Thank you, Pope Gregory.
Thank you, Gregory.
Yes, thank you, Pope Gregory,
that's where I got my name.
For fixing the problems in the Julian calendar, because the Julian calendar did not handle leap years well. That's
Julius Caesar? Really?
Not that one, Julian.
Oh, Julian. Oh, I get you.
So there's a oh God, the Roman names for popes and emperors is just an invitation to get confused, and we thought Herod was bad. Herod with his 4 sons named Herod.
As we mentioned last week, George Foreman.
Yeah. There have always been people that are so tied into their names and their legacies that you got to wonder what they break to do it. But anyway,
slight ego
I digress.
Problems.
Yeah, slightly, and so it creates problems for the rest of us. But when Gregory came in and created the current calendar with its months, and they set up that every 4 years there would be a leap year, and add an extra day to February, which got the short end of the stick. And why was February short? Because the new year used to start on April 1st. And so
wait a minute, back up. What?
If you look in antiquity, the new year was in April. That's why April Fools, the people who didn't get it when they shifted the new year to January. So if you adjust February, then you can tweak the beginning of the year if it's in April.
Oh, brother.
Okay, so there's a lot of reasons for that. And they discovered after a while that doing every 4 years didn't work. That kind of slid. And so they added the extra rule, but not if it's divisible by 400. That didn't quite work. And so they had to say if it's divisible by 100. And so they tweaked it and said, but yes, if it is 400. Right? So we've got every 4th year except if it's divisible by 100, but it is if it's divisible by 400. So we did do a leap year in 2000. Because it was divisible by 400.
Okay.
Okay. And every once in a while, we actually have a leap second. We had one about 2 years ago. A leap second.
A leap second.
A leap second.
How does anybody even know that?
The atomic clock knows it, the world clock.
The atomic, sure.
Yeah,
okay.
it knows it, and it just does it, and your cell phones all follow it. And if you dial into the Denver number, which I have discovered from my husband still works, and you can call in and hit your button and hit your chronograph
to recycle stuff here.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's still there. And clearly, Moses didn't have a world clock in Boulder, Colorado. So nobody had one until there was a Boulder.
Yeah, yeah.
You kind of needed Boulder, Colorado to have it. And we wonder why Boulder. Never mind. I'm going to get in so much trouble today.
This is amazing, yes.
But so calendars are kind of an interesting thing. So this is the month of Ramadan. This is the month where Muhammad fasted, and so Muslims fast as well. Now, so that brings up a couple of things. So this is a holy month for them. They're working their way through it. It's actually my birth month. It's my Jewish birth month.
That's right. Happy birthday.
Well, actually, my Jewish birthday is the 13th of ER. It's the 13th of this month, but not the 13th of May.
Come on.
It's the 13th of ER. Well,
okay.
So and it is the joy of the calendars that I learned very early as a kid to celebrate my Jewish date, because that way I didn't end up with a flat cake on Passover on the years that Passover went to the end of April. So, yeah, my secular birthday. So I have 2 birthdays a year, but I'm not getting 2 years older.
Oh. I am totally confused.
Anyway,
your dog has 7, right?
Yeah. My dog thinks it's a birthday every day. Something special. And John, you've called us, and you're on line 1. Thank you for calling.
Good morning. It's always fascinating listening to you. I mean, your show should be national.
Well, thank you, John. He said my show should be national. Thank you.
Speak up just a little bit, John.
I'm telling you, it's very rare. Not that I'm a brilliant scholar. I mean, I don't have any college degree, but my father was kind of like Abraham Lincoln. He was a self-taught man, and I did get through high school, but I've always been fascinated with history and calendars, too. And when I spoke to you around Passover, you told me something I had never known before, which was, how they have the Last Supper for Christians, and it can never be on a Thursday. And I guess Passover can't also never fall on a Monday and one other day, too. Is that correct?
I'd have to look on what I had said was that Hanukkah can't start on a Tuesday because of the rest of the rigging of the calendar. Passover can't start on a Thursday. That's because of Friday. You can't prepare the meal for Shabbat properly if you've got a festival the day before.
Yeah, I Googled it, and I saved the page, and I got the Jerusalem Post.
Okay.
This is from April 2019, and it said the first day of Passover can never fall on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday due to the rule in the Hebrew calendar.
Okay.
So I was just fascinated because when you brought that up, Christians always celebrate Maundy Thursday.
Yeah.
And I had never heard that before. It's just amazing, the history that's out there, and I'm just an avid history fan. My father instilled that in me.
Well, calendars rule, John. Calendars rule.
Well, you just brought up April. I mean, April was traditionally the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Until that got changed, and I'm glad you mentioned about April Fools. But the thing is, do you ever come out and speak to different organizations?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So
When we're gathering, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yes. So if I wanted to invite to my church, I would just get a hold of your office. Okay.
Yeah, and I do that all the time.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Because we would love to listen to. I mean, you could fill an hour in a hurry. I mean,
well, thank you.
The fact that you have, because Ramadan's another thing. I mean, I used to work for the Postal Service, and I used to tell them, why are you putting the Ramadan stamp every, the holiday, quote, holiday season? People don't even realize that means holy day.
Yeah.
And I used to tell them, Ramadan, you're disrespecting Muslims because, for instance, the year that I brought it up, I think it was in August. This is many years ago.
Yeah.
And they said, well, why? Well, I said, well, Ramadan was already in August. I mean, why would you have a stamp? If you want to put a Ramadan stamp on it, put it
in August. Yeah. Bother to learn the calendar. Yeah, I actually. Yeah. Go on.
No, I had to get a hold of Lafayette Square and tell them that Lafayette is a section in Washington D.C. where the postal headquarters are, and it took me like a year before I could get through to somebody. And I finally told them, and they said, "We never knew that." I said, "Well, if you ask a Muslim, you'd probably be upsetting them." But go ahead, what were you going to say?
Well, let me try to cover some of the things that you said. So you were talking about the issuing of a stamp, the Ramadan stamp, at the wrong time of the year because Ramadan had moved in connection to the Gregorian calendar. And, so you have the seasons of holidays. And, yeah, Ramadan's, only in the December window for 3 or 6 years, depending on how the calendars mesh. Somewhere, at least 3 years and as much as 6. Will there be some overlap? And so
it can come back every 33 years.
And it comes back every 33 years. It rotates through. And, I think people sometimes become aware of Ramadan when it's in the holiday season. By that, I mean the winter holidays. And it's not a winter holiday. It's a calendar holiday. Mm-hmm. And that's true. Muslims don't have seasonal holidays. They have calendar holidays. They don't have seasonal holidays, right? So we've got, the harvest festival, which is what Thanksgiving kind of is, and it's kind of based actually a little bit on Sukkot, on the Jewish harvest festival, and as John mentioned, the New Year of April, which was true. It's interesting if you look in history. There are things that people living today, unless they look at history, have no idea how things have changed. For example, December 25th, when America was first created, was not a national holiday. That didn't happen until well into times, and we can thank folks like Charles Dickens, who was part of the Make Christmas a Big Deal movement. I'm not sure what
Ulysses S. Grant.
I'm sorry?
Ulysses S. Grant, I think, was the president that finally made Christmas.
Ulysses S. Grant and other things that he did, right? Thank you for that, John. So John's a bit of a history buff, and
I just know a few things.
I understand. Well, and you bring up a good point, John, and unexpectedly in that, which is that we need to take people in their total. We need to take their contributions and their stuff, because the only thing we have to work with are humans, and we are all perfectly human. So we all have our foibles and our issues, and we need to look at the balance of things. And so
sometimes you can step on your feet, like the Postal Service was trying to be politically correct by being inclusive.
Right. They were trying to be inclusive with a Ramadan stamp. They just kind of stepped on their toes and put their foot where it didn't belong by not doing it at the right time of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that happens very often when we're not sensitive and aware of the other cultures within our culture. Right,
Now the Canadians, excuse me, I'm sorry. The Canadians celebrate Thanksgiving.
Right, they celebrate a different Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah. Is there any story that you know behind that, or why?
Well, what we celebrate is Thanksgiving.
Harvest, of course.
Yeah, it's an arbitrary date. And it's even more arbitrary now that we made it, the fourth Thursday. We wanted to make it easier on people.
FDR wanted the third.
Right. Well, I understand. Dates are arbitrary, really. And that's one of the things that I think people deify days. So I mentioned that I have 2 birthdays. And does it really matter when I celebrate an orbit around the sun? Not really. There's nothing sacred about the day that I finally, prevailed on my mother and came out. Or the doctor prevailed on my mother and I came out, depending on how you're born. And, calendars are very arbitrary, and they're there to serve us, to help us move through the year with some kind of cohesiveness. And we do need to be aware of each other. So, Canada has celebrated a different day. This isn't the day of the first Thanksgiving. And if you really look at history, the Thanksgiving has got a lot of problems, to put it mildly. Huh?
Jamestown.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems associated. With a variety of things, and so we need to be a little bit aware of some of those things. So thank you for your call, John. Really appreciate it, and I'll probably be talking some more calendar things as we go through.
And just tell me the name of your
congregation, Eitz Chayim, EITZCHAYIM.org.
I should know that by heart because you always have those commercials. Thank you so much for your information. God bless.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling, John. Okay, and we have Bob on line 3, also from Port St. Lucie. What's your question, Bob?
Yeah, my question is, I had heard that back on September 11th, 2001, when the planes hit the various targets, that whoever the person, some of the news people said that the reason that the Muslims did it when they did was that it had something to do with Ramadan.
I would have to ask when Ramadan was in 2001.
Okay.
Because I don't pretend to have that much wherewithal, but I can ask my phone, certainly. Ramadan 2001. Ramadan. He wants to give me Ramadan this year. Love my phone. 2001. Okay, Ramadan 2001. Ramadan 2001 began the evening of November 16th. So September 11th.
So they were a bit early.
Yeah, so it wasn't the reason, okay?
Okay.
That's one of those things where somebody looked around in that particular year, Ramadan was in September, and so they decided it must have been in Ramadan that they did, that those criminals did their act.
Okay.
But it wasn't. Okay?
Okay.
So we can shoot that myth down. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that. Now, there is an interesting piece, though, of confluence of calendars. So here's a piece. It was and I remember this because of having lived through 9/11. It was exactly 1 week before Rosh Hashanah that year, the Jewish New Year. And why would that be important? Had it happened 1 week later, then most of the observant Jews wouldn't have been in the building because they would have been in prayer. And then the conspiracy theories would have been rife. But as it was, they actually had originally, my understanding at the time, and this could be very wrong because I don't clearly have bin Laden's mind available to me, but I was told that he had originally planned to do it a week later and had to move it up because leaks were starting to happen, and he was afraid that word would get out.
Wow.
And that they would then know it. Yeah. Well, there's people like to fuel conspiracy theories and things like that. And so that would have been a really good one, right?
Well, it's interesting you talk about the dates kind of moving around as far as various holidays. I mean, you have supposedly the Christian Christmas, or at least
well, depending on whether
Roman Christmas.
The Roman Christmas.
And then you have the Orthodox, which is in January.
Right. Well, and Christmas around the world is celebrated very differently.
Sure.
By different Christians on different dates. Different parts of it are important for some, Epiphany, Advent, all the different parts of Christmas.
Right.
Christmas is really not just December 25th. And as you pointed out, that's a Roman, right? And so there's an importance here in recognizing that Protestant Christianity, particularly as it's practiced in America and in Europe, are children of Catholicism. Right?
Originally, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
because the Protestants were the Protestants, the ones who protested, thank you, Luther, right?
That's true.
Right, with his Facebook post on the wall. Right?
Yes.
Facebook of the time, you nailed it to the wall. You put it on your wall for everybody to read. It's the way Facebook happened back then. Right, so he put his protestations, and originally the term Protestant was a mark of derogatory terms to those who didn't agree with the status quo within Christendom. And so the Protestant movement start, and then, of course, they splinter off, and you've got Wesley and Calvin and Zangwill and all those folks coming in, right? So you've got all of that stuff going on in the world. And
then there's the Jehovah's Witnesses who don't have holidays.
Unless they're in the Bible.
Okay.
Okay. But you can celebrate, some things. What they reject is Christmas, the way that it's done, and those kinds of things. So they do biblical observances. So it is a different system. They don't do Halloween, and they don't do all those things that Christianity and European culture picked up over time. Right, Halloween being really Samhain, coming out of the pagan traditions of lighting a lantern for the souls of the departed.
Well, yeah,
right, lighting a
remember
gourd.
Our nuns in Catholic school when I was a little kid, they did not like Halloween.
No.
I mean, of course, the following day was for the souls.
Yeah.
All Souls Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you've got this give and take between pagan practices and Christianity, and as the two become one, right, the holidays kind of take on this weird thing. Easter, Ostara. Ooh. Rebirth. Fertility.
Ooh.
Bunny rabbits, eggs.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
What does a bunny rabbit or an egg have to do with Jesus?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing, but it has everything to do with fertility and spring. Right? It's when the chickens start to lay their eggs.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's when the bunnies start appearing in the yard. Thank you, my dogs, who let me know the first bunny that ever shows. Right? So, they come out of hibernation. That's a rebirth. So now I'm really going to tie it, right? You've got Ostara, Easter, Esther, the book of Esther.
Yeah.
Right. So there is a tie in there. It's a spring, Mardi Gras, Carnival, festival, spring, cabin fever, upside down. All of those things are organic and connected. They're not independent. And there's a really wonderful hint about Esther in the book of Esther. We find out that her name is Esther, which means hidden in Hebrew. Esater, I will hide, which gets into an interesting thing. But her Hebrew name is Hadassah, and Hadassah means myrtle. Now, here's another clue coming from somewhere else, doing some of the things. And Bob, are you still there, by the way?
No, I think he's gone.
Okay. Sorry about that, Bob. Myrtle is the sign of Venus.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the original words to the melody that we use for the national anthem, okay, it's the Ode to Anacreon, I'm not saying it right, but there's a line in there is, I shall teach you to entwine the myrtle of Venus with Bacchus's vine. Wine, Women, and Song. Okay, well, it's a very, very bawdy tavern song. And why did they pick that for the national anthem? Because everybody knew the melody.
Wow.
Ooh. And it happened to fit. Okay, it happened to fit. And so, yeah, but anybody can Google that. Google original words to Star Spangled Banner. It's not the Star Spangled Banner, but it is the original words to that melody. And
Wow.
it's about teaching young folks to drink and do other things that you do at taverns. So, we have an interesting history, and there's always been a bringing in of popular melodies into the liturgy. There's a very popular German version for one of the songs in the Shabbat morning, and it's a drinking song. Okay?
In the morning?
Well, yeah, not so that you drink in the morning, but because it's rousing. Dun 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 tararam bum 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 bar. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. It's got that. You can just hear the beer steins clanking to it. Because those were the kinds of things that made it fun to be in the bar.
Okay.
To be in the tavern was the singing, because we didn't have, ESPN on 500 screens in the bars.
Sure.
So you needed something to keep people in there and having fun. So the tavern keepers used to hire bards, used to hire people to come in and sing songs. And they would teach jingles to publicize different brews and things like that. Sometimes the manufacturers, like
Barry
Nottingham,
Manilow started that way. Oh,
Nottingham Ale was a popular.
oh yeah.
Nottingham Ale,
Yeah,
Nottingham Ale,
Yep.
da 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 da, Nottingham Ale. Not that we have Nottingham Ale anymore. I don't know if we do or not, but it started as a tavern song. And what would happen with these jingles is that people would pick them up because they were lively tunes, and the bards would come through tavern to tavern to tavern. They'd teach it and then move on to the next one. And that way people would sing these things, and the more they'd sing it, what beer do you want? Oh, Nottingham Ale.
Sure.
Right, because it's in the song. And so there was this great competing of popular melodies that went through the taverns, and people knew those melodies. That's how that melody gets tied on to the national anthem. We constantly reuse melodies, right? God Save the Queen, King, whichever, right? Depending on the year. Right now it's been the Queen for a while, and God willing will continue to be for a while. May she continue in health. So, we reuse that melody, right?
So who's next? Speaking of, who's next in succession there?
Who's next? I haven't.
In Britain. I have no idea.
You need a scorecard.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
You need a scorecard to keep the Brits, and the Brits love their royal family, and that's a good thing. I'm glad for them. Yeah, I'd like to. Never mind. I'm not going anywhere near any of that. So yeah. So we've got all of these different cultures with different holidays. There's indigenous holidays. There's tribal holidays. There's cultural holidays, there's secular holidays, there's religious holidays. There's lots of different chances for holy days. As John mentioned, a holiday comes from the word holy day.
And, I remember, of course, when we were in Tucson, to hear of the various holidays up at Navajo or Hopi or locally by Tucson with our Papago tribe.
Yeah, or the Yaqui Easter, which was different,
Yaquis,
right?
yeah,
Yaqui Easter was different.
Yeah.
And and in some ways not today would not be politically correct, some parts of it, and it's been tweaked. And so a lot of that kind of stuff goes on. And again from Tucson, the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
La Reina, the Queen of Mexico, right?
Yeah.
That's what
you bet.
She's been called, and we've got churches for her here in Port St. Lucie. So the Virgin of Guadalupe has come out of the Spanish-speaking world, right? Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about a conflicted religious world. It's the indigenous folks as they were forced upon by the Spaniards, right? Spain was not all. No.
They were not very nice.
They were
folks.
not nice.
The Jesuits were not very nice back then either.
They were not nice to anybody back then. La Conquistador was not Los Conquistadors. Los Conquistadors. Had to think for a second there. My Spanish went out the window. They enslaved the indigenous populations. They forced them to build these things under very grueling circumstances, and then tried to and then forced them to convert.
There's some interesting things on the various walls, and if you drive down the Baja Highway to the tip by Cabo San Lucas, as Carol and I have done a few times, and you look in the churches there, and you see some of like the Indians building these churches, but then how many were killed? And it was like, wait a minute, this is not good.
And there's other stuff going on where you see that statues that are called St. John or somebody else are actually indigenous holy folk, and so there's this attempt to make it more palatable.
Yeah.
By different integrations, and so you have the splinter group of the Native American church and some of the spirituality churches that have come out of this the shotgun wedding, if you will, and it's a shotgun wedding between the two cultures. And the ones who really lost were the indigenous folks.
Yes,
big time.
There's no doubt about that.
You want to talk about somebody that we celebrate that is really questionable is Columbus. What Columbus did to indigenous peoples is just horrific.
In several different areas.
Oh yeah. Well, look at Hispaniola on our area.
Sure.
The native population dwindled so incredibly. And you want to talk about conspiracy stuff. Look at all the bad treaties that we still haven't honored, and if we ever tried to, it's an existential problem now because they made treaties that they knew they weren't going to keep.
Yeah,
they had no intention of honoring those treaties. They wanted to box the indigenous folks into a very tiny little box and use it to pound on them, and then not honor it.
Land that was far less fertile than what they were used
to put it mildly. On the other hand, they've got some beautiful land out in Arizona.
They do, yes.
But COVID's another example where they're not getting the resources that they need.
The poor Navajos oh my God, the death toll out there is awful. I mean, but there again, our lovely Indian health system is almost non-existent.
Yeah, and talk about comorbidities, and high drinking rates, high smoking rates,
less education. I mean,
less education, extreme poverty,
and of course, federal dollars don't find their way.
They don't trickle down at all.
No.
Some of the worst poverty that I've seen has been on reservations, and it's like everybody's got their hand in the pocket before it gets to the reservation, and it just gets eaten up. Any money that's intended there. So, I always did try to do some things, whatever. There are not easy answers. Mm-hmm. We have not learned as a culture, as a people, to share. We have not learned to respect each other. And I love being an American. I love our country. I just wish we could do a better job. We've still got a lot of work to do. The Founding Fathers started with some great ideas, but, they had some very narrow definitions of who a man was. Right? When those Founding Fathers wanted men to be equal, they weren't thinking of you and me. At least, I don't know. I guess you have a small chance because you're at least male and white. But I don't know if you own the acre of land or not.
Yeah.
So, and they really did. They meant rich white men that were properly connected. And those are big issues. We still need to work on that. There's a lot. The world has so much abundance, but we're not sharing it well, and we're not administering things. And I guess the biggest tragedy that I'm seeing out of the current pandemic is that the rich are getting richer, and a lot of poor folk are going to get a whole lot poorer out of this. There's a whole big strata of our society that's going to pay very dearly, and and people don't care about much beyond their immediate family, unfortunately. This is really a chance for us to reach out and do something for others. And I see some of it. I'm not totally discouraged, but I'm not seeing as much as I'd love to see. And, my niece in Virginia is sewing masks for healthcare
Oh,
workers.
that is so cool.
So a shout out to her. And
Does she have a business?
they started a little nonprofit, she and some of her friends, and they've just been, while they've been self-quarantining, they've, and social distancing and all that stuff, they've been sewing masks. And
So what's the name of this group? We'll give them a plug.
that I don't know. I have to ask her. I don't know
Yeah.
if she's watching or not. It's somewhere it's in her Facebook posts. But she and a group of her friends have been making these masks and taking them to the frontline folk. And she says that they cry when they bring the box of them up. And
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and
Wow.
she's got directions posted and all kinds of stuff so that you can do it as well. My big problem is to one time and B, my sewing machine hasn't seen me sitting at it in a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I used to love to sew. That is
Carol too.
That's
You're busy. Come on.
Yeah. Well, that is. I decided this about a week ago. This is my next year birthday goal for myself, is that I'm going to have some time to do some of those things. I'm going to restructure my life coming out of this in a way that, God willing, I'll have the health and the time to do some of these things that I've been talking about wanting to do. And, I'll fit it into the schedule somehow. I will get a more normal set of hours and tasks.
Yeah, right.
And a healthier income. So that's as good a place as any to say, folks, if you'd like to help sponsor Ask a Rabbi, this is your opportunity. Call in. Help me do this hour. If you like this hour, help it stay here. Because we really do need some funding to make it happen. And we can dedicate an hour to you or to your group or whatever. To either contact the radio station or contact me. Contact me through the congregation Eitz Chayim, EITZCHAYIM.org, or find us on Facebook. Eitz Chayim PSL is after the /. You'll find us on either place. We do stream. We have streamed forever. By that, we haven't been around all that long. We're 5 years old, but our we've streamed, I think, 4 of those 5 years. So you'll find us live on Facebook every Friday night at 7:30, even during the pandemic. We've managed to make it happen, not necessarily as gracefully, and certainly not with anywhere near the congregational participation, but you're welcome to participate at home.
Okay, question. Now
Sure.
that the governor has opened things up for most of the areas, not Palm Beach or Miami.
Are we going to open the temple back up?
Are you opening the temple?
I would say as long as we can handle the people at a distance, we're not going to do a mob in there. And that's an interesting point, right? The board had this discussion about, how do you open it safely?
Yeah.
We've actually started those discussions.
Okay. Well, that that's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we're not a big facility. If somebody wants to donate a piece of land to us in Port St. Lucie, absolutely ready for that, because we will build on it. If you give us the land, we'll build on it. And you know, we're looking for bigger space, or you know, Port St. Lucie doesn't have a lot of older buildings that can be rented and renovated.
A lot of land, though.
And losing it quickly.
And losing. Oh yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
You bet. We're growing.
It's
by leaps and
infilling
bounds.
like crazy. As I came out, I think 4 different lots between my house and I live near Becker and 95, and I don't live that far into the area. I live by Woodland Trails, by that new park.
Yeah, know where it is.
And I passed 4 lots that have been cleared in the last 2 weeks.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
You know, it's mind-boggling how much infilling is going
Well,
on.
Port St. Lucie is projected again. Actually, Dr. Jerry Parrish has upped his numbers from 520 to 530 by 2030. I think that's way too soon, but you never know.
You know, it's growing very, very quickly. I think it's going to be huge. I really do. And I don't think, you know, the coronavirus is not going to stop that, because I can't picture it being as big an issue. Yeah, I think we'll have 1 more year of it, and then there'll be hopefully enough immunities and enough whatever to relegate it into the corral of viruses. And
if you look at our move-ins, number 1 move-in now is Miami.
yeah.
This corona thing could actually speed up the growth of Port St. Lucie.
Yeah.
Number 2 is Fort Lauderdale now. And number 3 is New York. So New York had been number 1 for over 20 years.
Yeah.
But it shows you that southern migration north.
Yeah, the bubble is moving north.
Yeah, it is.
You know, well,
It
it's
is.
kind of hard to go, you know, south of the Keys.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
now there's a
unless you
problem.
Annex Cuba.
Even if you annex Cuba, you know, you still got this island problem issue deal, right? And there's only so much sand you can dump in the water, because the
That's
hurricanes
right.
will take it out anyway.
How true.
There's a reason why, you know, if you look at the paths of the hurricanes and you look at the path, the shape of the Gulf and the shape of Florida, it kind of makes sense, right? The coastline is the way that the hurricanes swim up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, land is not going to resist air. And sorry,
Especially air traveling 140 miles
exactly. You know, air and water, as the Taoists will tell you, the softest things are the strongest things.
an hour. Ooh,
Yeah.
I like that.
Isn't
Never
that,
heard
yeah,
that before.
right? Nothing can resist water and air over time with enough force.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the rock wears away, the rock weathers. So, yeah, we actually learn by looking at all the different cultures and looking at all the different things. And we do learn by looking at history. We tend to forget it. You know, I had somebody the other day telling me, you know, I've never done this before. And I said, well, what about, you know, last Thursday and 2 years ago? And, you know, it's not new. But we tend to look at the current thing as if it's the first time it's ever happened. It isn't, folks. Plagues and famines and pandemics have been around since dirt.
Sure.
And they will continue. This is one of, you know, and God willing, it'll be a long time until we have another horrendous one. But, you know, we have had some really horrible ones. And, you know, we always have conspiracy theories of people weaponizing plague or weaponizing Ebola or weaponizing this or weaponizing that. You don't have to. They do it quite well by themselves. And, you know, we are only 6 degrees of separation apart. So it's not surprising that one person who gets sick, who doesn't want to stop doing what they're doing because they feel under the weather and they feel compelled to complete the business deal, to complete the obligation to provide food. You know, I'm thinking back of the very first Hanukkah that we had as a congregation. There was a bug going around, and several of the people in the congregation had it. And one of the women, and nobody got sick from it to my knowledge, but she was feeling under the weather, but she had committed to frying out 100 latkes. And she said, I'm not well enough to stay, but I'll bring the latkes. And so she brought a tray of hot latkes, and they got put out on the thing for people to eat. Do I think anybody got sick from it? No, I don't. But I will also say the chairperson who was running the event was already sick and starting to feel it. But, of course, she couldn't not come because she was the chair. And she felt like, yuck. But because she had committed to doing it, and this was just a plain bug going around,
sure.
Quote-unquote bug. Probably a virus because it was giving people, quote-unquote, the crud. Not as lethal and not as scary as coronavirus, just one of those ones that make us sick, and except for maybe an occasional person getting more complicated. And I'm sure that some people do die. My father-in-law died from the flu. So I'm very, very keenly aware that, even in our world of vaccines, as you've pointed out, people can still get sick even with a vaccine, right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bringing back those memories.
I had one of the most violent flu attacks after our flu shot this year. Yeah, it happens.
It does happen.
Sure.
And, God keep us strong. God help us keep an eye on the prize and on moving forward. May we have compassion as we move into this season. May we take some of the lessons of caring for others. One of the big lessons out of Ramadan, by the way, I didn't get that far into the discussion before the phone call started, but it's to care for those who have less. Right? And so, for example, those who can't fast are invited to give portions to the poor, equivalent to what they're eating, and those who are fasting are invited to give the money they would have spent on that food also to the poor. The Muslims have a tzedakah, which is very close to tzedakah, which is the Hebrew word meaning righteous giving, the obligation to take care of those in our community who have less. Yeah, Judaism doesn't have charity. Charity is a gift. Tzedakah is not optional. It's required giving.
Oh.
So
okay.
I invite everyone, may you have a wonderful, blessed week. May you have everything, including health. And God willing, I will see you next week at Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL. And you're always welcome to call in and ask a rabbi. You're welcome to sponsor an hour of Ask a Rabbi. Thank you all. Have a great week. See you next week, God willing.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world. And congratulations to the talk of the Treasure Coast, 28 years young today.